Okay, the pre-release material is about a club that takes senior citizens out on trips. Now in task 1 it says that first we need to determine how many senior citizens are going out on the trip. So the first thing we need to find out is how many senior citizens are going on the trip, right? And for that we'll ask the user to input the number of senior citizens that will take the trip, right? So we'll ask the user to input that value for us. Then he says that if the number of then he gives us this table, right? Then he gives us this table to work out how much a trip is going to cost. For example, if 12 to 16 people are going, then the bus or the transport that we are going to hire is going to cost us $150. The cost of a single meal, remember this is cost of a meal, so a cost of a single meal is going to be $14. The cost of a single theater ticket, it's not saying tickets, it's saying ticket, right? So cost of a single theater ticket is going to be $21. And you should notice that this amount has been written down as 150, right? It has been written down as 150, whereas this amount has been written down as 14.00. So in this amount you are seeing a fractional part, right? So this is a real number. This is a real number. A real number is a number which has a fractional part, whereas this number has been mentioned in the table as an integer value. An integer value has no fractional part, right? So the cost of a bus has been given as an integer value, right? 150, 190, 225. But the cost of a meal has been given with fractional values. So this is a real number: 13.5, 13.00, 20.00, 19.00. Okay. So basically what he's saying is, if 12 to 16 people are going, these are going to be the rates that are going to apply. If 17 to 26 people are going, these are the rates that are going to be applied, right? So these are going to be the respective rates that are going to apply. If 27 to 39 people are going, then these are the respective rates, right? The bus is going to cost us $225. A single meal is going to cost $13.00, and the cost of the theater ticket is going to be, a single theater ticket that is going to be $19.00. So he's provided some information to us, right, regarding how what kind of costs are going to be incurred if this trip is going to be taken, right? Okay, then he has provided us some important information, right? He says that the minimum number of senior citizens that are required is 10. So if we have less than 10 senior citizens, we are not taking the trip. But if we have more than 10 senior citizens, if we have 10 or more than 10 senior citizens, we can take the trip. So the minimum number of senior citizens required is 10, but there is also a limit on the maximum number that we are going to take out, right? So the maximum number of senior citizens is 36, which means what? If we have a number of senior citizens between 10 and 36, then we are going to be taking the trip, right? So the number of senior citizens can be 10 minimum and 36 maximum. And with the senior citizens, at least 2 helpers will be going. With the senior citizens, at least 2 helpers will be going, right, to help out the senior citizens. So on the trip, two helpers will be going. However, he says if the number of senior citizens is more than 24, which means what? If the number of senior citizens is 25, if the number of senior citizens is anywhere between 25 to 36, in this scenario he says that an additional helper will go. An additional helper or an additional carrier is going to be required, which means what? If we have the number of senior citizens anywhere between 25 and 36, then 3 helpers will be going out on the trip. But if we have a number of senior citizens between 10 and 24, in that case only 2 helpers will be going out. Okay, so the total number of people going out on the trip will depend on this information. How many senior citizens are going out, right? If the number of senior citizens is between 10 and 24, 2 helpers will go out. If the number of senior citizens between 25 and is between 25 and 36, 3 helpers will go out. And one final thing he has said. He has said that the helpers will not pay anything. They will not pay anything on this trip, which means what? Which means that the helpers will be going out on the trip, the helpers will be eating a meal, so their meal will have to be purchased. The helpers will also be in the theatre, their theatre ticket will have to be purchased. However, they are not going to pay for their meal, they are not going to pay for their theatre ticket, right? And they are not going to pay anything for the coach that has been hired or the bus that has been hired, right? So the helpers will not pay any amount, which means what? The senior citizens that are going on the trip will be contributing money to pay for the helpers that are going with them. So the helpers will not pay anything, but their money or the amount that is going to be spent on the helpers is basically going to be paid by the senior citizens. Okay, let's take a look at the solution. One final thing I forgot to tell you. As in task 1, we are supposed to calculate the total cost for the trip, right? So we are going to calculate the total cost for the trip, right? What is the total amount that is going to be spent? And then from this we are going to calculate the total cost that is going to be paid per person. So we are going to calculate the total cost that is going to be paid per person. Just remember one thing, that the cost per person which is going to be paid per person, I should not say total, I should say the cost that is going to be paid per person will only be paid by the senior citizens, right? The helpers are not paying anything. So once we calculate the total cost, then we are going to divide this total cost with the number of senior citizens that are going out on the trip. That way we will be able to calculate the cost per person. Okay, so let's take a look at the solution, the code that I have written down for this scenario. Okay, the first 2 lines are my declarations, right? This is where I have done my declarations, meaning I have declared all the variables that I am going to be using within my program. And to declare a variable, this is the keyword, this is the word that you use declare, and then you say people, for example, and then you mention the data type, right? Integer, for example. So what you're saying is that I am about to declare. So this you call as a keyword, right? This word has a special meaning. This word is used to indicate that I am going to be doing a declaration. I'm going to be declaring a variable, right? So this word has a special meaning, that is why it is called a keyword. This people is the name of our variable, therefore it is also called the identifier of our variable. The name of our variable is also known as the identifier of our variable. And this here is the data type. So this will indicate the type of data that is going to be stored in this variable, right? So this integer is our data type. Okay, so we have declared senior citizens as a variable, we've declared people as a variable, and both of these have the integer data type. In the next line I have declared total cost as a variable and cost per person as a variable. These have been given this data type real. Okay, now the total cost has been initially set to 0. So on this line I am doing my initializations. I am giving initial values to my variables, right? So for example, I have said total cost equals 0.0. You notice I have given 0.0 because total cost is what? It is real, right? So real data type has a fractional part, right? So I have said 0.0 even though the fractional part is 0. I did not write total cost as 0. I did not write it down as 0. This I did not do because total cost is not an integer. If this was an integer, then I would do something like this. But total cost is a real number. That's why I have initialized it to 0.0. I have also set the cost per person equal to 0. So these are the initial values that are given to these two variables. Okay, moving on. Then I have, this is a prompt, right? This is a message that I am giving to the user. I am using the output command to give a message to the user which says enter number of senior citizens that are going on the outing, right? Enter number of senior citizens interested in the outing. So once I have given this message, then I am taking the input from the user. So the user will provide me the number of senior citizens that are going on the outing, and that value will be stored in this variable called senior citizens. Now remember, we said that the minimum number of senior citizens that can go is 10, and the maximum that will go are 36. So in these 3 lines right here, I am making sure, in these 4 lines rather than 3 lines, in these 4 lines I am making sure that the user is entering a valid value of senior citizens. So I am doing my validation. I have to make sure that the user enters a value of senior citizens between 10 and 36. Remember, this was the minimum number of senior citizens that could go out on a trip, and this was the maximum number of senior citizens that could go out on a trip. And if you can check this while loop that I've set up, in this while loop I'm checking whether the number of senior citizens is less than 10. Did the user give me a value of senior citizens less than 10? If that is the case, then we are going to enter this loop. Or else, if the number of senior citizens that the user has provided is greater than 36, even in that case we are going to enter the loop. So whether the user provides us a value of less than 10 or greater than 36. If any one of these is true, if the value of senior citizens is less than 10 or if the value of senior citizens is greater than 36, in that case we are going to enter the loop. Inside the loop I have a prompt, right? This message which is going to be shown to the user, which says that invalid value of senior citizens has been entered. Please enter a value between 10 and 36. So this prompt, this is called a prompt, right? The output message is called a prompt. So this prompt is explaining to the user that he has entered a wrong value. He should enter a value of senior citizens between 10 and 36. So he's been asked to enter a value once again. Once again the user will provide a value using the input statement. We are taking a value from the user. That value that will be provided will be stored into this variable senior citizens. So once again the user is going to type a value of senior citizens which is going to be stored into this variable. Okay. Once again, when this loop ends, we are going to have to check whether this value that was provided by the user, whether this is a valid value or not. So this control is going to be transferred to the top of the loop, and here once again this value that was recently provided, right, by the user is checked once again, whether senior citizens right now is less than 10 or is it greater than 36. So if the value is still wrong, right, once again we are going to enter the loop. Once again the number of senior citizens is going to be input, right, and once again we'll go back up and we'll check, whether this time the new value that has been provided is valid or not. So as long as the user keeps providing wrong values, he will be stuck in this loop. As soon as he provides a good value, a value between 10 and 36, right, in that case we will exit this loop, and now we can do our calculations, right, because now we have a valid number of senior citizens. So what we are doing here is we are applying if conditions. See, if the number of senior citizens is between 10 and 14, right, so here's what I'm saying. If senior citizens is greater than or equal to 10 and at the same time senior citizens is less than equal to 14, which means what? Senior citizens can be 10 or greater than 10, and at the same time the value of senior citizens can be 14 or less than 14. So what we are saying is that the number of senior citizens is between 10 and 14. If that is the case, then we are going to calculate the total number of people. That's the first thing we need to do. If the number of senior citizens is between 10 and 14, then the number of people would equal what? It would equal the number of senior citizens plus 2. Remember, because we have 2 helpers in case 24 or less than 24 senior citizens are going. So if we have 10 to 24 senior citizens that are going on the trip, we'll be using 2 helpers, right? If we have 25 to 36 senior citizens going on the trip, then we'll be taking out 3 helpers, right? So in this case the total number of people is calculated by this equation, right? If the number of senior citizens is between 10 and 14, this is how you calculate the total number of people going on the trip. Okay, once we've calculated the total number of people going on the trip, then we can calculate the total cost of the trip, right? Because then we know how many people are going. If the range is between 10 and 14 senior citizens, then we are going to have two helpers, right? Which means what? Minimum 12 people, maximum 16 people, right? If we add two helpers, right? These are 10 to 14, remember, is the senior citizens that are going on the trip, and in this case two helpers are going to be added. So the number of people in this case are going to be between 12 and 16. Okay, since this table he has provided us with since this table he has provided us for calculation using number of people, he has given this column for number of people, not number of senior citizens, right? So just make sure that you understand that this column is based on number of people that are going on the trip, not number of senior citizens. So 10 to 14 people mean 10 to 14 senior citizens means when you add helper, then you'll have 12 to 16 people, right? So this is the bracket, or this is the row from which we have to do our cost calculation. In this case, the cost of a bus or transport is going to be $150. Cost of a meal is going to be 14, and cost of a theater ticket is going to be 21. And if you see here, I have used this formula. Total cost equals 150 plus number of people that are going, right, multiplied by 14 plus 21. This would give us a total cost for the trip. For example, let's have an example value. Example, the number of people is equal to 14, right? For this case, total cost is going to be, in this scenario, okay, in this scenario, total cost is going to be what? 150 plus 14 multiplied by 14.00 plus 21.00, right? So this is what we have to find out, and this will come out to be $640, right? So this is how our formula works, right? So so for this bracket where we had 10 to 14 senior citizens going out, we calculated the number of people that were going and the total cost that it would cost us for the trip. We repeated the same situation for the number of senior citizens between 15 and 24, right? Because if the number of senior citizens was between 15 and 24, then only two helpers would be going out. So that's why we've calculated the number of people using this equation, people equals senior citizens plus 2, and then finally we've calculated the total cost using the same formula, right? But this time the values that we've used are these values, right? So 15 to 24 senior citizens, 15 to 24 senior citizens means if we add our two helpers, this would be 17 to 26 people, right? So 17 to 26 people for that category. This is the bracket from which we have to do our costing. The cost of a bus is going to be 190, the cost of a meal is going to be 13.5, and the cost of theater ticket is going to be 20.00. And if you see here, these are the values that I've used in my equation to calculate the total cost. So in case the number of senior citizens is between 15 and 24, then the total number of people and the total cost is going to be calculated using this if condition, right? And in case the number of senior citizens is between 25 and 36, in case the number of senior citizens is between 25 and 36, if this is the number of senior citizens that are going on the trip, then we have three helpers, right? Three helpers, which means what? Number of people would be 28 to 39, right? So this would be the number of people that will go out on the trip, right? So our calculation, so this is how we're going to calculate, this is how we've calculated the number of people going on the trip, and then the total cost has been worked out by taking a look at our table for this entry between 28 and 39, between 28 and 39, right? So obviously you can see that there's a problem with this entry, right? because this entry is for 27 to 39 people. We can never have 27 people going on the trip. See, for anything less than 24 citizens, if we have 24 or less than 24 citizens, we are going to be taking 2 helpers, right? So this is the boundary value, right? For 24 citizens, 2 values means what? 26 people can go. If we have an exact number of 24 senior citizens going, then we'll have a total of 26 people going on the trip, right? But what if we have 25 people going on the trip? Now 25 is more than 24, right? In case we have more than 24 citizens going, then we'll need 3 carriers. We'll need an additional helper, right? For that case, we'll add 3 to 25. For 24, we'll have 26 people. For 25, we'll have 3 helpers, so the number comes out to be 28. So there is some problem here, right? So this should have been 28 to 39. We can never have 27 people going on the trip. Anyways, for this bracket, we are going to be using these entries, right? This is going to be the cost of the bus, this is going to be the cost of the meal, and this is going to be the cost of the theater ticket. So we'll calculate our total cost based on these values, right, that have been provided to us. And that is exactly what I've done here, right? I have used 225 as the cost of a bus, right, or the coach, and then this is the cost of a meal, and this is the cost of a theater ticket, right? So we're using the same equation, right? But only so what we've done here is, based on how many senior citizens are going, we've been able to work out the total number of people that are going on the trip and the total cost. Total number of people going on the trip, total cost. Total number of people going on the trip, total cost. Obviously one out of these 3 is going to be selected, right? Because the user is for one trip, when the user gives us the number of senior citizens, then we can either fall into this bracket or this bracket or this bracket. So one of these 3 categories is going to form our number of people that are going on the trip, right? We can either have 10 to 14 people going on the trip. In that case, this is where we are going to do all our calculations. If we have 15 to 24 senior citizens going on the trip, this is where we are going to be doing our calculations. And if we have 25 to 36 senior citizens going, then this is how we are going to be doing our calculations, right? So once we have done that, we are now ready to calculate the cost per person. Remember, the cost per person is going to be calculated for the senior citizens, because the helpers are not paying anything. So whatever total cost is, and total cost has been calculated using number of people, right? So the total people that are going, and this includes the helper. So when we have been calculating the total cost has been calculated using the number of people that are going on the trip. So once the total cost has been calculated, we divide it by the number of senior citizens, because these are the only guys who will be paying for the trip, right? The helpers will not be paying for the trip, right? So to explain this further, let's take a look at the example that we were doing. See, we had 14 people going, right? And this was the total cost that we worked out, right? For 14 people, this was the total cost of the trip, $640. In this case, we have 14 people, which basically means we have 12 senior citizens, because out of these 14 people, 2 of the people were helpers, right? So we had 2 helpers, right? Which means basically we have 12 senior citizens. So in this case, the cost per person would be what? Cost per person in this case would be 640 divided by 12, right? Because the senior citizens will be paying all the cost. So that comes out to be $53.33. So that's the amount that each person will have to pay, right? Each senior citizen will have to pay. That is why the cost per person has been calculated using this formula. Cost per person is equal to total cost divided by senior citizens. I hope you understand how this cost per person has been calculated. So that completes task 1.